Welcome again. My name is Matt Pittman. I'm a principal analyst with Brandon Hall Group, and it's my pleasure to be the host of our session today. Sorry, got to stop. Just saw a note that somebody's joining us from Dahlonega, Georgia. Love Dahlonega, where I went on my honeymoon 30 some years ago. And so great part of the North Georgia mountains. So welcome from all over the place. We're glad to have you here. I am really pleased to be joined today by my friends from ELB Learning, Ellen Burns Johnson, who's the VP of Learning Strategy Growth for the Growth and Strategy team at ELB Learning, and Carrie Weiser, a senior learning strategist and experience designer with ELB Learning. Welcome, folks. Great to have you with us today. And we do
want great to be here.
Absolutely. We are going to have a good time today. Sorry, Scott and I are having our own conversation. He got married in Dahlonega. That's how he found it. So sorry, we're having a little personal moment. Back to business. We want to thank ELB Learning for sponsoring today's webinar. ELB Learning offers an industry-leading suite of innovative software and professional services that empower businesses to unlock their people's greatest potential through customized learning experiences. As a full-service learning and development partner, ELB Learning helps clients strategize, develop, deliver, administer, and optimize learning programs tailored to each organization's unique business goals. Customers benefit from cutting-edge learning technology solutions and services, including gamification, virtual reality, video practice and coaching, staff augmentation, and courseware. ELB Learning also offers expert consulting, development, and training for organizations' AI initiatives to help discover how employees can work smarter and more efficiently. Hey, Ellen, do you want to tell us a little more about how ELB works with their customers?
Yeah. So again, I think as Matt was just saying, what we do really depends on what our customers need. And so the first thing we do is we partner with you to really figure out exactly what problems you're trying to solve. And from there, we walk with you until the end of that journey, right? Whether you're starting with some sort of program strategy, whether you're jumping into design, whether you need help with development, or you need some staff augmentation services to fill some open positions. We're there with you from before you start till after you finish. And it's always really gratifying to see the journeys that our customers are on and how they're bringing their learners along for the ride.
Excellent. Look forward to hearing more. If you are new to Brandon Hall Group webinars or the Brandon Hall Group, we work with organizations in a variety of ways, including through our Institute membership, which gives access to research and tools, our preferred provider program, as well as our well-known Excellence Awards program. Our technology awards are actually still open for about another 6 weeks. So a good opportunity to submit for recognition. You can check all of that out at our website. But at the heart of what we do at Brandon Hall Group is our research, and we do have a handful of open studies, and we'll be opening a new study in about a week on the topic of diversity, equity, and inclusion. So be on the look for that. You can find all of those at these links when you receive your handout. But you can also go to our website and click on Open Studies and find the links there as well. We do want this to be interactive. Ellen and Carrie and I have had several conversations. We're excited to sort of share our thoughts and perspective with you and encourage you on your AI journey. If you do have questions, you can use that Q&A panel that's available to you there in the Zoom window. You can also feel free to weigh in on the chat as we go through. We will gladly incorporate your questions and thoughts as we go through, as we walk through our agenda today. We do have a Q&A time reserved at the end of the session should we need it, but we are more than willing to engage with you long before that. So please feel free to do that. And now my colleague, Shay Salvato from Brandon Hall Group is also with us, and she's going to let you know why you want to be sure you stick around to the end. Shay?
Yes, thanks, Matt. So we will be announcing the winner of our raffle at the end of today's webinar. The winner will receive 50% off the 2025 HCM Excellence Conference. And you have to be present to win, so make sure you stay till the end. Matt, back to you.
Thanks so much, Shay. Uh, and with that, we're going to jump into today's agenda. And I will just say, if you've not been to the conference, it's a phenomenal experience where you get to hang out for 3 days with people who get what you do. And the conversations are amazing. So you should definitely check that out. Today, though, we want to talk a little bit about what's happening in L&D and AI, because we've all heard it. We've all heard the ominous news that AI is going to steal jobs and that AI is going to take over the world and all of that. But is that what's really happening in L&D organizations and in companies in general? We're going to dig into that. And then we're going to really dig into, for us, L&D professionals in working in this time, how do we navigate this AI revolution and this whole transformation that's happening around work technology? And then we want to really bring that in practically and focus in on what are those skill sets that will help as we navigate this time. Where should we be looking to grow ourselves and improve our own skill sets? And then where do you start? If today is day one, where do you start down that journey? So we want to get started, though, with a quick poll. And we've got 2 questions for this poll. We all know that work is shifting dramatically and has continued to shift. So Shay's going to launch this poll. The first question is really about your team and how well equipped do you feel like your learning and development team is to navigate the complexities of this work technology transformation that's going on. Ranging from extremely well equipped to extremely ill equipped, like we're on it or we're not on it at all, or we're somewhere in between. And then the second question is really about you, because you're a part of the team. How do you feel personally in your work about how equipped you are to navigate this technology? So Shay, we're going to launch these as separate, it looks like?
Yeah, that's right. We'll do one after another.
All right, perfect. So let's take a look at how we're feeling about organizations. Okay, so somewhat well-equipped to somewhat ill-equipped, right? Kind of riding that middle of the curve, Ellen and Carrie. That's pretty much what I expected. Is that what you expected?
It is for me. There's that kind of bell curve shape that we so often run into in so many different contexts. But yeah, I'm not surprised to see everyone kind of in that middle bump, because it's been a big topic of discussion in the industry and in kind of popular culture for the last several months. And so I think lots of conversations have started, but it's also fairly early on, I think, in the development of how this technology will impact the L&D space. And so, like we see with so many new technologies, there's a firestorm of conversation in the front when it first hits the market. And then things kind of slow down because it takes a lot more time to figure out exactly how you're going to use it. Carrie, what do you think?
Shay, let's go on and launch that second poll. And and that's Ellen, I think that we've talked about the fact that that's the reality of where we are, right? And so what we want to do is help all of us in the learning profession to get ahead of that. So now that things are kind of stabilizing. So this question is about you. First one was about your team. Now we're talking about you. How do you feel about your equippedness? That's not a word, but how are you feeling? How well equipped are you feeling to navigate this time? And Shay, you can go ahead and pop those up whenever you feel like we've got a good number. Carrie, what do you think we'll see with the individual responses versus the organization responses?
Oh, you're asking me to predict. Well,
I am.
Well, I'm curious because, well, I just saw it here. That's actually a little different than what I thought, but in a good way. So I was worried that there was a potential that people would think that organizations were better equipped than they were. So I'm happy to see that it's actually slightly different, that people are feeling more along the lines of that they kind of know what's going on, as opposed to the organizations running off without them and they're having to run to keep up. So that's actually, I like that.
Yeah, that's excellent. So we're taking time to sharpen our own tools, as we used to say back in the day when I first got started. Excellent. So let me catch us up here. All right. So let's talk a little bit about what's just kind of going on. Let's paint the picture in terms of um, context here. So we know from our research at Brandon Hall Group that companies this year are investing in things like upskilling and linking learning to performance and learning measurement. Technology selection is still at the top of the list. Aligning learning strategy with business goals is still at the top of the list. And when it comes to AI specifically, we know that companies are in that evaluation and testing phase. We're evaluating tools, we're implementing tools in specific teams, running those pilots, building the business case, evaluating those legal issues and the risk factors associated with it. So we know that, the work is not slowing down and we're in that testing phase. And the challenges, and this data right here, this is hot off the press. This is our newest study on the learning revolution, which hasn't even been released yet. That the biggest challenges that are facing L&D teams, like balancing short-term and long-term priorities, collaborating across functions, budgeting and resource management, resistance to change anybody, continue to be top of mind, and they are also challenges that could potentially be impacted in a positive way through the intelligent and smart use of AI. And then my favorite slide, and this one is really hard to read in this format, but don't worry, you're going to get a copy of the slides and you get a link to the recording at the end of our session. What you need to know when you're looking at this is the orange bar and the blue bar represent staffing levels expected to remain the same across L&D, and staffing levels expected to increase across L&D. What you don't see is more than a couple of the gray bars, which indicate staffing is decreasing. So we're still doubling down. We're still committing to the L&D team and its ability to be effective. Ellen and Carrie, how is that resonating with what you're hearing from your clients and customers?
I can take that one first, Carrie, and I'll be brief. I think this is interesting because I think this data you're sharing on the graph kind of runs counter to the broader narrative around concerns of AI taking jobs. I don't think that's what we're seeing in the customers that we work with who have done staffing changes. It's not necessarily because of AI. Certainly that might influence the way that they are, structuring their production pipeline, but that there are lots of restrictions around what AI can do and how it can be used. And so those changes aren't necessarily as fast as one might think. I think that the customers I have seen that I've worked with who have been reducing their L&D workforce, it's mainly because of other reasons. Maybe because they're changing the way that they deliver training, they're moving back to in-person from online, and so they're restaffing. It's not necessarily that they're reducing, they're just shifting things around. That's what I've seen in the recent past. Do we have time for Carrie to jump in too?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I would echo that. I think that more often than not, what I'm hearing from companies is that it's ways to streamline what you're doing now and to use it to make you do things or help you do things a little bit faster and quicker. So the time to step in is less about jobs being taken away, but for us to kind of control the narrative about how we can use AI in ways to improve our efficiency and where it just doesn't really help at all, or where we need to navigate some of the things that it doesn't do well. So I don't see it so much changing jobs as I do changing expectations of what we can do and how quickly we can do it. And then the need for us to come back and explain perhaps that maybe the expectations aren't aligned with reality.
Very good. So let me ask you at this point, and maybe Carrie, will start with you and then switch to Ellen. What is your personal journey as a learning professional been through this whole evolution and advent of AI technologies and other new technologies and work?
Yeah, it's funny because I've been doing this for a while, right? So AI is relatively new in the spotlight, but basically it's basically highlights just what I've had to do all along, which is just keep adapting to change. So when I first started out doing instructional design, we would have big meetings and we would sit down and we would really craft long-term curricula, and we would have designated people who would do, design and writing and, video and visuals and programming and all of that. And then as more and more tools came in, we started to kind of combine roles and we started to move things a little bit faster, and we would focus on micro learning instead of full curricula and all of that. And now as AI and all of these other technologies come in, I feel like we still just need to back up and focus now on how we're going to adapt to them and adapt to the change, and focus on long-term mindsets and curricula that can kind of help us really build in that culture of continuous learning. So I think there'll still be opportunities for micro learning and things like that. There'll still be opportunities for somebody who considers themselves an e-learning designer or developer to build those types of things. But we also kind of have to start building out these skill sets where we think of those as pieces of a larger whole. And the idea that sometimes when we're developing an e-learning course, by the time we're done, it's already outdated. So how can we start to use AI as one of those tools in our toolkit, the same way that we might use another tool to basically make our process more efficient, but not take away from the fact that really what we're trying to do is drive behavior change. So I think it's just shifting that mindset to more of a creative problem solving on a larger scale, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And I think I want us to jump in and really get going on uh, the the meat of the conversation of how do we start navigating these waters. I've seen several comments coming through in the chat about being asked to teach on AI, or trying to get alignment on what those expectations of what AI can do. And so we definitely want to start getting into some of that. But really, let me ask you, you kind of touched on this, Carrie, and so maybe Ellen, you can weigh in a little bit more on from this perspective of how do you see the role of learning professionals changing with the integration of AI tools?
Yeah, I think I see it accelerating a trend that we've seen a lot over the last many years in learning and development, and that is to shift L&D from a kind of delivery focus to more of a consulting focus. And what I mean by that is, instead of getting a request for training, making a training, and then moving on to the next thing, making more space in an organization to get that request, and instead of immediately working on it, have a conversation like, okay, you want to make training, let's just spend a little bit of time understanding what problem you're trying to solve. And if we go through that and actually we agree that training is the right solution for that problem, then of course we're going to get you the support that you need to make that training and deliver it well. But um, training is not the only solution out there for performance problems. When we were talking about training, it's because we want someone to do something differently, right? We want them to perform differently. And I think AI, um, because of how it can easily slot into someone's workday and just their workflow, opens up a whole new realm of performance support options. And also and this is something I think I saw Cindy mention in the chat, it can make analyzing data a lot easier. And so if you're able to get data, rich data from technologies like modern LMSs or LRSs, then you can, in other ways, surveys, so on and so forth, observation, you can more quickly aggregate that data and see what story it's telling using AI tools. And then you can have those performance-oriented conversations with parts of your organization much more easily than you could 5 years ago. So I see AI transforming L&D. Yes, because it might make production of learning experiences faster and easier, but also because it makes it faster and easier for us to deal with data and have data performance-driven conversations. I hope that wasn't too verbose. I feel like I said a lot of data and performance, but hope that came through all right.
No, I think that was exactly the answer we were looking for. And as we think about that in the ways that it can impact us, What are some of the challenges or misconceptions about AI and learning and development, and how can we address them? And I know we've got one question, Ellen, that you wanted to touch on. It might fit here too.
Yeah, I think this came in from Greg on the Q&A panel, right? Using open source large language models um, in a function like an L&D, it can closely link to HR, which can sometimes have links with personal data. And that I think is a very industry and organization dependent answer. It really depends on the specific restrictions and the specific data that you're dealing with. That being said, more and more organizations are looking at taking open source models and then running their own instance of those models that are protected. And so that information doesn't go outside of the organization. At ELB Learning, we have something like that running on ChatGPT. So we have a ChatGPT model that isn't connected to the outside world, the data that we ask it about, when we try to think through what customers need, or we're using it as a thought partner, that data doesn't go anywhere. Now the customers that we work with, they're not sharing, personal identifiable information or healthcare information with us. And if they were, we wouldn't be putting that into the model either way, but there's still proprietary information that we're dealing with, even if it's at a brainstorming level. So that's why we spun up that instance so that we could still use the tool without some of those risks. But that's one specific instance, one specific use case. It might not work that well for everyone. So if you're looking at trying to find ways to do that, it's kind of something where you want to partner with an expert to help you think through that.
What are some of the other kind of misconceptions, and how do we address them, or help people understand some of these concerns and limitations that maybe people aren't as ready to see?
You want me to jump in? So I think one of the things that people are often, I've touched on it earlier, are often talking about is that AI can make things so much faster, right? Or AI can make things so much better. But AI is really just built on the information that we have put in there. So it has our biases, it has our ways of thinking about things. So one of the things that I think is really important as we move forward with AI is just making sure that as we're using it, if there's some way that we can control that narrative to help people understand what it can do and what it can't do. So when you are using it perhaps to draft a script for something, it's very unlikely that that script is going to be the thing that you take all the way to the end of development, right? It's something that you need to work through. It might have some ideas. You might need to validate it. I've talked to people who will put a script in one and then put it in another, and kind of like another tool. So put it in ChatGPT, then put it in Gemini, and kind of cross reference and all of that. So I think one of the big misconceptions is that it can do everything, but really it can just get you started at this moment. So even if you're using it to analyze data, then you want to make sure that you're going back in and you're going to validate it. So it can make us more efficient. It can get us over that sense of writer's block, but it isn't necessarily going to be able to come in there and do everything for us. So the more that we can talk about it as a tool that we can leverage to help make our jobs easier, as opposed to a tool that is going to do X, Y, Z so that we can do A, B, C, I think that's kind of managing that expectation is going to be really important moving forward.
Absolutely. And I think that preparing ourselves to sort of continue to walk through that and become I think it's entirely appropriate that learning and development become the expert in how this can really benefit the organization and how to do it in a smart and careful way. So what are some other ways that we can encourage learning teams and our folks that are joining us today on the call? How do we prepare ourselves to navigate all of these complexities?
I think one thing, as we're talking a little bit about how the role of L&D is shifting a little bit, but part of what it's doing is it's just moving further back in the process. So when we think about AI, and I know that people have said, well, I need to develop an AI course, right? But we need to understand, and as much as you can push back as possible, right? It can be hard. It can be hard to go back and push back against things like that. But what we really want to do is we want to identify when we will use that tool, why we will use that tool. So it goes back to things like job and task analysis and setting performance goals and all of that. So instead of just developing a training program about AI, we actually kind of need to back up and talk about how it will be used on the job and create a whole series of resources. It might be a training program to get you engaged with it. It might be also an agent or something that you can physically use that will take you through a process. It might be some chat bots or something like that that you can use to get information. So again, it's this multifaceted idea of pulling together not just what you're going to train on AI, but why and what the goals are and how you're going to track that effectiveness back so that you can keep monitoring and not just keeping up with how AI is shifting, but also keep up with the effectiveness of all these different things that you're trying to do in order to make it usable on the job and relevant, right? Nobody just wants to hear use AI. They want to hear use AI because it will help you do this. Use AI not because it's going to put you out of your job, but use AI so that it'll make it easier to do this so that then you can focus more on this other part of your job that you might like a little bit better or be a little bit better at, or that you have some skills that you've really worked hard to develop, but you never get to leverage because you're always back here trying to,
Yeah.
type out a memo.
Or, focus on things that are more impactful in the list of 8,000 tasks that you have to do. What's the most important? What's the most impactful?
Right. And I think Linda's right on the money with her comment when she says we have to stop thinking about AI as one thing, because it's not a single thing, it's a category. And there are multiple paths and multiple iterations of how AI technology can benefit business and individuals and learning as well. And so I think part of that is helping manage and set expectations, or help managing expectations, particularly from our stakeholders, right, Ellen?
Yes, and Greg had another question in the Q&A panel specifically about managing leadership expectations. I think that this is one of those instances where L&D can set the table rather than wait to be invited to the table. And getting ahead of those questions and maybe scheduling a lunch and learn, or reaching out and saying, we're setting our, we want, you're setting your roadmap. How can we help? People have questions about AI. Trying to just get in there and get some of that basic education about what we mean by AI, how it isn't more than one thing, what it enables us to do, and what questions you're prepared to help explore for different, units within your organization. Yeah, start the conversation. I think that's the main thing when it comes to managing leadership expectations. Everyone's always going to come to a conversation with some preconceived notions about what something is, whether that's AI or video or branching scenarios or gamification. But you're the L&D expert, right? So you're the expert in how that technology, how that kind of solution can be brought to bear in your space. And if you set the table and invite people in, then you're already holding the microphone. You're already at the head of the table saying, this is what the conversation that we're having. And I think that's a good way to maybe get in front of that a little bit and proactively manage those expectations.
And it's like any other tool or any other technology we bring into our learning technology stack, in that we have to understand where it fits for our organization, and where it fits for one person's organization may not be exactly where it would fit in another organization. So you have to really, if anything, I think, Carrie, I thought what you said was so insightful about it's moved us back in the process, because I think for a long time, because of rapid authoring, we got really good at sort of skipping right to the product component instead of starting at the analysis stage. We sort of went, yeah, there's a problem and we'll build a course and we'll get it done. And I think what we've really learned in recent days is the importance of that front end analysis and really getting clarity on what the problem is and how AI can help. Excellent. All right. So let's start shifting the conversation just a little bit more from sort of the broader kind of philosophy around AI and where it fits. And let's talk about what do we want to work on? What are those skill sets that we as learning professionals need or want to focus on as it relates to all of this technology transformation? And I do have another poll to pop here, because one of the things that we're curious about is really, are we investing in the development and growth of our learning teams? The learning team exists to develop the organization, but what are we doing to help develop our learning teams? So Shay's going to put up a polling question right now that talks to this. So to what extent is your organization, or does your organization, prioritize skill development for learning professionals? And I know there's some of you out here that are a team of one or a super lean team, and that can be really challenging. And we're really happy to be your partners in that part of the journey. That's a big part of who joins our Brandon Hall Group webinar. So we're grateful you're here. But how is your organization doing with that challenge? All right, Shay, let's take a look. Oh, I apologize. This was an earlier poll question that we skipped over. So reinforces what we've been talking about, the impact of AI in organizations' learning and development initiatives. Let's go ahead and jump to that next poll question, Shay. Sorry about that. There we go. So while we're waiting for that one to come up, so Carrie, where would you start? What skills would you want to start focusing on? Or did you start focusing on when it first started coming around?
Well, I think when we're talking about, for me personally, when AI first came around, was basically, we joked about this earlier when we were talking, but the hill that I always die on is critical thinking, right? So it's not just AI is a great technology, right? But I need to vet it the same way that I would vet an LMS, or the same way that I would decide if I needed to use Storyline or something like that. So first of all, it was just that critical thinking aspect. Like, what is it good for? What is it not good for? What is it really going to be used for? What is something that it's not really ready to be used for? Because I think we think about AI and we hear the sci-fi versions of it, and sometimes we get a little bit ahead of ourselves as to what it can really do. So beyond that, like the idea of the critical thinking, then I would move into some very hands-on skills with it, but I don't want to talk over the webinar question. So
Absolutely. And so if you take a look there, it looks like a pretty normal distribution. What I love is that the lowest numbers are on the unsure and no priority at all on the development of your learning teams. That's encouraging, right, Ellen?
This is higher than I expected. I'm so glad to see this. I was kind of expecting more of a trend towards the bottom. But I'm really happy to see that it's more towards moderate priority and even high priority. Still some low priority in there. Hopefully that changes. I mean, we're all L&D professionals, right? We all believe that learning is really, really important. So I don't feel like I'm going to be saying anything controversial when I say we've got to make time for people to learn, because there's just so much out there and there's more all the time. It's hard, it's impossible to keep up if you don't prioritize. And the other thing is that, when you're learning on your own, it's not necessarily contextualized into your space, right? So you can learn a skill, but to really practice a skill, you have to practice in context. And so if we're trying to learn about AI, when we're really trying to practice it, you have to practice it in a context. And the most significant ROI for an organization is to give people time to practice using those tools within the context of the organization that's going to use them. So I'm glad to see this. I'm really curious, and we might get some answers to this in the chat, but I'm really curious about how this takes place. Does this take place as like free time that you have to explore the tools and build prototypes about what might be useful? Or is it more structured than that? I'm just curious what's actually happening on the ground.
Yeah, so that would be great. Let us know in the chat how is that development taking place for you? And I also want to pull out Cindy's question in the Q&A panel. You know, how do we manage or advocate for time available for learning, right? Because you know, Cindy's example is their company is 3 hours a month for reskilling, but sometimes, you know, it's hard to make that case that learning is the work. You know, learning is part of the work, it's part of the job. So what are some tactics or approaches that have you've seen work successfully? Carrie, why don't we start with you?
So as far as just trying to, let me look at the Q&A because I want to make sure that I answer it directly. How do you manage or advocate for the time? Yeah, 3 hours per month. So I do think that that's a challenge. I think that being able to prove back metrics is important, which is because you want to be able to show that the time that people are putting in has a return on investment, and that's notoriously challenging to do with L&D. It's just really, really hard. But if we can use um, AI to help us build better assessments, and the way that I say that, for example, with AI, I can go in and I can build out the wrong answers to questions that used to take me hours upon hours upon hours to figure out, right? I can build out branching scenarios or personas. So there are some things that I can do there to make it easier for me to make realistic, kind of what Ellen was talking about, contextual assessments that will not only show that people how to use those tools on the job, but then also come back with data that tell me whether or not they really are learning how to use those tools on the job that I can then bring back and say, look at this, we did this before they didn't know how to do it. Now they know how to do it. They spent this much time training. It had this much time of a, you know, of a impact on that. That's a really hard conversation. I'm not saying that it's easy, but if we can leverage metrics to create better assessments and better tools for tracking those kinds of things, then we can bring that back and then prove that we are making an impact that is then basically bottom line, what people are looking for. Most of the C-suite conversations that I have seen that drive more budget go directly back to proving certain metrics that show that you actually improve performance over time, as opposed to I just put 3 courses up there and people took them. So I think that's really what AI helps us do over time. We'll be able to basically analyze the data better and build better assessments. And it's just a process that we need to do to get there. But it is something that I think we need to drive towards in order to prove the value of what we do.
I think, and just briefly to add one thing onto that, Carrie, what I've seen work effectively in multiple organizations, but up close, I've seen it work really effectively in ours, is project-based learning. And so what you can do is you can find you can just through participating in conversations across the organization, you can hear needs from the organization. And then if you are kind of thinking big picture about the team's specific needs for professional development or an individual's desire to learn a specific thing, if you can match those, sometimes you can use you can kind of get those things aligned and put together a brief project-based learning experience. And you can say, okay, this person's going to spend 3 hours a week for the next 4 weeks creating a prototype that might help solve this problem. So you're not necessarily investing a ton of time, and it's not necessarily going to be the most efficient, but you're also not investing, you know, like I said, a ton of resources into solving the problem. And it's possible that you might get something useful out of it at the end. Very least you'll get some answers and you'll learn a little bit more about some technology that's out there. So project-based learning, I think we've used that effectively in our team. Some of our software development teams also do that really well. And I think that's one way that you can incrementally build some alignment, and it strengthens relationships across the organization too.
And I think the other piece that, you know, we always advocate for at Brandon Hall Group is remembering your core purpose. The core purpose of learning is to drive the business performance success. So performance over time, yes, but ultimately we should be moving the needle on organizational performance, and ways that leveraging the right technology in the right place with the right people can lead to that outcome tells an even more powerful story for sure. So let's talk maybe a little bit more about just practically what are those skills? What are the other skill sets that we need to focus on to stay relevant in all of this transformation that's going on in the age of AI? What would you guys say is most important?
So there's two ways. I think across the board, it's just important to stay flexible, open-minded, curious, which is a skill that is hard to teach, but if we can reflect that in our training, so maybe instead of having top-down instruction, we have ways of bubbling up information that people can be curious about and find and engage in. I think it's just one of the things that we've been struggling with so long, I think, in training is that so much of what we do is based on teaching people facts. But we all know when you walk out of that classroom, you're only going to remember a small number of those facts. You can maybe come back and like do 30, 60, 90 quizzes to see how much of it you remember, but it's still facts. I think focusing on the fact that we need to be creative about solving problems and building skills. So kind of switching it, like facts are at our fingertips. We can look anything up. But one of the questions in here I saw in the channel, talking about generative AI and prompt engineering skills and things like that. Those are general skills that can be applied in many different contexts. And those are the kinds of things if you were to develop an AI course, I wouldn't want you to develop a course that went into a lot of detail about the difference between machine learning and natural language processing, because it doesn't matter, right? You can look that up tomorrow. What you really need to do is know how to craft a prompt that will then basically give you back information and how to put some guidelines and constraints on it so that the AI doesn't hallucinate and give you wrong information that you then pass on to 15 people in your group because you didn't realize that it was wrong. So it's that kind of switch from us developing these knowledge-based trainings to these skill-based trainings, which leverages things like the project-based training that Ellen was talking about that leverages more social learning. So all of those kinds of things are the skill sets. We need to kind of expand our view of what training is. And a lot of what I've been spending my time in is just diving into a lot of different ways. How can I create learning experiences for social learning that go beyond discussion boards, right? Because every time, if I'm taking a course and there's a discussion board, I'm immediately like a little bit scared because I don't know if I want to do that. So I'm trying to find ways that I can leverage the technology and build things out to that's where I'm spending a lot of my time. So how can I use AI to help me build a variety of different experiences that can all work together to make people more curious and invested and engaged in the learning process?
Ellen, what would you add?
I think one of the things that I'm leaning on actually is more of a communication skill. So the AI space moves so quickly. I use it in my personal life, I use it in my professional life, but there's way more out there that I'm not even aware of. And so what I've been trying to do is really reach out and build some connections with people who are keeping up with that space and can really help me think through the solutions that I want. And I'm trying to get better at articulating what I want to accomplish, right? So, hey, I have this problem I'm perceiving on with many of our customers. I I want to solve it in this way, or I think this is an opportunity that we can help. Is AI part of this, or help me think through the different tool sets and technologies that we could use to put this together? And so I'm trying to do more around communicating what my intent is for solving a given problem, and then trying to reach out and lean on my existing relationships to get the specifics in there, because um you know people will love to talk about AI. That's why we're all here, right? But the people who've spent a lot of time and continue to spend time keeping up with the field and understanding the technology on a deeper level, they want to share their expertise, right? So I don't have a ton of trouble getting somebody to help me think through what that is. So I just kind of I've been trying to hone my ability to articulate what I need and what problems we're trying to solve. Because then I can get help elsewhere in actually getting the details right.
And I think that that moves us really well into the conversations that you and Carrie and I have had about, where do we start, and the thought process around kind of that focus on mindset. So I'm gonna take us to that for a quick second, because there's still a handful of really good questions that I think we want to get to. But what I'm hearing both of you say is really get your mind in alignment with the fact that this is definitely happening. And so continue to be committed to your own learning and being adaptable as things evolve, being as educated and knowledgeable as you can be about the actual technology and the ways that you can use it. The thing I've always encouraged folks to do is, just if you're not using it yet in your work, start using it where you can within the parameters of what your organization has put in place. Um, Talk to us a little bit, Ellen, about this focus on mindset and why that's the right place to start.
Yeah, I think focusing on mindset, if we contrast that with focusing on delivery, rather than learning how, learning specific technology to deliver faster, that might be part of what you can do. But if we're focusing on mindset and making ourselves a little bit more agile in our thinking, then I think that moves us from optimizing a workflow around courseware to optimizing our workflow around problem solving. And that's more valuable to the organization as a whole, right? Um, in most cases, our ability to deliver and launch courseware or deliver training programs isn't necessarily the main product that our organization is putting forth to the public. And so if we're thinking more on this adaptable, continuous learning mindset, if we're thinking about the problems we're trying to solve more from a design thinking perspective, it puts us closer to the public facing deliverable that your organization is putting together, the product, the service, so on and so forth. That's not to say that courseware will never be a solution that we want to do, or there will never be a training program, but I think it broadens what we consider to be an L&D solution. And that's a mindset shift, right? There are a couple questions in the Q&A that I said we were going to answer live, but we'll get to those, I think, in the Q&A session that's coming up in a bit.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
to
And
answer
I
your
think
specific question, Matt, that's what I'm thinking. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. And I think we can start to move to those questions. Carrie, do you want to add anything to the mindset conversation before we do that?
No, I think that's good. Let's go to the questions. And I just wanted to mention that there was some chat here about legal issues. So if we want to do that as part of the Q&A too, because we've gone through those same issues. So we feel it.
Absolutely. So let's just jump now to answering as many of these questions as we can in the next few minutes, and really kind of digging in there. Why don't we start with the question that I love, which is how can we leverage AI for learning in the flow of work, which was in the chat a little ways back.
Yeah, I saw that come through too. I can't remember who posted it, but there's also a related question in the Q&A panel from Gregory. So I think one of the easiest ways to leverage AI in the flow of work for someone who is trying, if you are working on problem solving, one of the easiest ways to do it is to do something like create a GPT. And I'm not familiar enough with the other platforms to know what it's called in other platforms, with Claude or Gemini or anything like that. But essentially what this means is you are taking your model and you're creating almost like an instance of the model that's more narrowly focused on a specific problem. And so you tell the AI to adopt a specific persona. You tell it to the type of problems that you're going to ask it to solve and how you want it to approach those problems, and then what format you want the solutions to be delivered as. And you can do this. I've done this for everything. Like let me just open up Chat GPT right now. I've got case study assistant, an RFP response analyzer, a presentation bot. I also have a Jira bot that helps me put together queries in Jira, because that's a nightmare. I have to do it on my own. Business analyst bot for some reason, and I don't remember why, I opened up a lyricist GPT that I guess I wanted to write a song about something, and so it helped me with that. And there are thousands, millions of these bots that are already structured, but you can create your own in only a few minutes. And so what you can do if you have your own organization's instance or subscription to one of these models is you can make those available to other people in the organization. And you can also take documentation and you can train your bot on that documentation. And I believe you can restrict it so that it's not trying to pull in information from anywhere else. It's only ever referencing what you give it. And that's a pretty quick way for you to create kind of a helper that someone can just go to and pull in the flow of work. If you want people to be talking about a product in a very specific way, well, you can train it on the product information. You can train it on how you want to talk about the product to customers. And then you make that available to people who are writing emails, writing marketing copy, taking phone calls, and it can, the users, your people can lean on that bot to just ideate verbiage. So that's just one example of how we can, quickly create things that within the flow of work. Now, the specifics of what that look like might be really different from organization to organization. I know some of you mentioned that you're dealing with legal restrictions, and you can't just go to chatgpt.com and work with that. But that's an example of what's possible, and the specifics of how that gets rolled out. It's really different from organization to organization. But that's just kind of one example of what we can do right now. In the future, I think it'll just be easier to access those and faster.
And you also see in many different work systems where the technology provider is building in that capability for learning in the flow of work through not through an LLM, but through a true chatbot experience where I can load relevant content, links to relevant content, links to resources, anything I've got in my learning ecosystem into that chatbot, so that if I'm asking, somebody goes in and says, I need to know how to enter this requisition, and part of what it pops out is, hey, you can go look at this learning, you can go watch this micro lesson, you can go watch this video, or here's the job aid that walks you through it. Those are some other more practical ways that are already available out there as well.
I've done some call center training too, where they have these huge knowledge bases that are stored in places, and you can only find the article if you type the exact title of the article. And so a lot of your training is focused on how do you type the right title of an article to find it in the knowledge base. But if you can use a chat bot, then it can help you search that. All of a sudden you've cut your training time because the chat bot makes it easier. And you've also cut the time that it takes to find the article. So you've improved customer service. So that's one example. It might not necessarily be direct learning, although you kind of need that job aid to do the thing you need to do, but it does help just make it easier to find information. And I think that's one of the things over and over again in a lot of the curriculum that I design is, how do we get people to find the right information at the right time? And if we can leverage AI to help us do that, then when we start to develop content, it can be more about how do we train them to do the things that they need to know before they do this? How do we train them to do the things that can help them do it better, as opposed to how do we train them to do this thing that they won't remember tomorrow? So,
right. That's very, very true. And I think it's important that we circle back to and talk a little bit about the fact that for all of these well-known publicly available generative AI platforms and tools, ChatGPT, Claude AI, Gemini, there are applications to that where you can, to Ellen's point, close that off from the open web. So if you're leveraging it on behalf of a team and your organization has made that decision, then you do have safeguards that are in place. I know there's a lot of concern about releasing intellectual property into the LLM and into the web, and it's out in the world and we can't get it back. And I think that that is part of the evolution of this technology, that is in those specific contexts much more secure than if you just go to the free site and start asking it questions and uploading, proprietary documentation. That's probably not the right approach to take. Awesome. I think this is what we know. We have scratched only the surface of a very big, very deep issue. Ellen and Carrie, I want to thank you guys so much for your time and expertise today. I want to thank this audience who have been unbelievably active and vocal and engaged with us on this journey. What I think we've learned is that we're all still passionate about getting it right, which has always been a big part of what's driven me to love the role of L&D in the organization. And with that, I think we have a raffle giveaway to do, and then one more bit of information to share. So, Shay, take it away.
Thanks, Matt. I am very excited to announce the lucky winner of our raffle today. Congratulations to Mariana Vital on winning today's prize, 50% off the 2025 HCM Excellence Conference. We will be sending you some information shortly to celebrate your win.
Well done, Mariana. And if you want to learn more or keep the conversation going with our panel today, the email addresses for both Ellen and Carrie are there on your screen and will be present in your handout. And that there is also a link on that slide to book a conversation to learn more about how ELB can help you navigate these times. Thank you again. Enjoy the rest of your day.